Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Tamara.
Tamara Padi had a life that seemed to be on track. An accomplished woman, a loving mother, and a dedicated professional. To the outside world, she had it all. But in the shadows of her life, a dark story was unfolding, one that would lead to an unthinkable tragedy. It was July 7, 2021, when Tamara unknowingly walked into the final chapter of her life. After a long day of work, she returned home around 1:30 a.m., tired but determined. What she didn't know was that her estranged husband, Aubrey, had already entered her home. He had been waiting for the right moment to strike, and that night he was ready. Though Tamara had separated from Aubrey months earlier, their relationship was far from over. He had been controlling, keeping tabs on her life even after their split. The tension had been building, and it was about to erupt into something violent. As she stepped through the door, Tamara's world shifted in an instant. Aubrey, hiding in the house, attacked her without warning. Armed with knives, a hammer, and rope, he brought her life to a brutal and abrupt end. What could have led a man to do something so violent to the mother of his children? What drove Aubrey to commit such a horrific act against a woman who had always worked hard to provide for her family? Stay with us as we piece together the shocking details of Tamara's final moments and explore the painful truth behind the crime that stunned an entire community. Tamara Padi was born in South Africa, a country rich in diversity and culture. From an early age, it was clear that she possessed an infectious personality. Friends and family often described her as the type of person who could light up a room, someone whose laughter had the power to make any gathering feel warm and welcoming. Her natural charm and ability to make others feel at ease became one of the defining characteristics of her life. As Tamara grew older, she pursued higher education with a determination that matched her vibrant personality. She relocated to the United Kingdom with her husband, Aubrey Padi, to start a new chapter. Despite the challenges of settling in a new country, she threw herself into her studies. Her commitment to education was driven by a simple but powerful desire to create a better life for her family. While pursuing her master's degree in law, Tamara balanced the responsibilities of being a mother to two young daughters. It wasn't easy, managing academics, motherhood, and the pressures of everyday life, but she did it with grace. Her children, Tia and Mia, were always at the center of her world, and she worked tirelessly to ensure they had a stable and happy upbringing. But Tamara's ambition didn't stop at education. She also co-founded Greenleaf Health and Social Care Limited with Aubrey, a business aimed at providing high-quality care services for adults. It was a venture that showcased her entrepreneurial spirit and her commitment to making a difference in her community. She was deeply invested in this project, putting in countless hours to help it grow, even as she faced personal struggles within her marriage. Tamara's professional accomplishments were a testament to her resilience and her drive. Despite her personal challenges, she continued to succeed, balancing the demands of her career with the needs of her family. Yet, behind the scenes, her marriage to Aubrey had begun to unravel. What started as a partnership built on shared goals and dreams soon became a relationship marked by control and manipulation. In February 2021, after 14 years of marriage, Tamara and Aubrey separated. While the decision to part ways was difficult, it seemed like the best option for Tamara and her daughters. But even after their separation, Tamara's life remained entangled with Aubrey's in ways that would become increasingly troubling. Despite the physical distance between them, he continued to exert psychological control over her life, monitoring her every move and undermining her sense of freedom. Tamara had expressed her concerns to close friends about Aubrey's behavior, noting how he would go through her phone voicemails without her consent. It was clear that even though they were no longer together, he still had a grip on her. Friends later revealed that she had been hesitant to speak out, fearing that any action could lead to further conflict. Yet, despite the tension, Tamara remained focused on her daughters, her career, and the life she was trying to build in a new country. Her story wasn't unique. Many women face similar struggles in controlling relationships. But Tamara was determined not to let her circumstances define her. She had dreams of creating a better life for herself and her daughters, and she pursued them relentlessly. In her professional life, Tamara was known for her dedication and compassion, qualities that made her a respected figure in the care industry. She had a genuine passion for helping others and had touched the lives of many people throughout her career. Her work at Greenleaf Health and Social Care was driven by a desire to make a meaningful impact on those in need, and she was respected for her commitment to the well-being of others. Despite all her achievements, Tamara was also deeply involved in her family's life. Her daughters, Tia and Mia, were her world. Even during the toughest times, she ensured they had the love, attention, and stability they needed. Tia, who was 15 at the time of Tamara's death, often spoke of her mother's ability to turn any situation into something positive. Mia, who was 10, remembered how her mother made her feel like the most important person in the world. But in the weeks leading up to her tragic death, it became evident that something darker was brewing. Despite her best efforts to keep the peace, the cracks in her marriage with Aubrey had deepened. Tamara had always been resilient, but she was about to face a battle she never expected. A battle that would end in a way no one could have anticipated. In the months before Tamara Padi's tragic death, the tension between her and her estranged husband, Aubrey Padi, had reached a breaking point. While they had separated in February 2021 after 14 years of marriage, their lives remained deeply entwined, especially for the sake of their 2 daughters. But it was clear to those around them that the separation had not brought the peace Tamara had hoped for. Aubrey's behavior was becoming more erratic and controlling. Even after the separation, he maintained a significant influence over her life, using his knowledge of her routines and behavior to keep tabs on her. Tamara's friends and family members had noticed the unsettling signs. Despite her wish for independence, Aubrey would continue to monitor her closely, going through her voicemails, showing up uninvited, and refusing to let go of the control he had once held in their marriage. It wasn't just emotional manipulation. Aubrey's actions were beginning to feel more invasive, more forceful. Tamara, though an incredibly strong and independent woman, was becoming increasingly fearful. Her professional life continued to thrive, and she was highly regarded in her work at Greenleaf Health and Social Care, but her personal life was becoming an overwhelming strain. She confided in close friends, expressing her unease about Aubrey's ongoing interference in her life, but as many women in controlling relationships do, she was reluctant to make any drastic moves. There was always a part of her that hoped things would improve, or that Aubrey would eventually come to terms with their separation. Tamara had always been a dedicated mother, fiercely protective of her daughters. Even though the relationship with Aubrey was strained, her primary concern was ensuring her children's well-being and providing them with stability. Tia, her 15-year-old daughter, was well aware of the tensions between her parents and often found herself caught in the middle, trying to balance her loyalty to both. Mia, the younger of the 2, had less understanding of the complexities of her parents' relationship but was still impacted by the emotional weight of the situation. In August 2021, just a few months before Tamara's death, her fears began to manifest in more alarming ways. Aubrey showed up at her house unexpectedly, demanding to speak with her. Tamara was frightened by his sudden appearance and tried to maintain her composure. She had been living in a new home, hoping to start fresh, but Aubrey's presence felt like an unwanted reminder of a relationship she was desperately trying to move on from. In the weeks that followed, Aubrey's persistence grew. He would appear at Tamara's place of work, making his presence known even when she wasn't expecting him. He would call her multiple times a day, leaving numerous voicemail messages, his tone becoming increasingly hostile and accusatory. There was no real space between them, despite the physical distance created by the separation. The psychological hold Aubrey had over Tamara was impossible to shake, and it became apparent that he wasn't ready to let go of their marriage, or the control he exerted over her life. Around the same time, Tamara began to experience a growing sense of unease. Friends and family noticed that she was becoming more withdrawn. She seemed preoccupied and no longer had the same lightheartedness that once defined her. She had always been a woman full of energy and optimism, but in the months leading up to her death, there was an undeniable shift in her demeanor. It was as though the walls she had built to protect herself were beginning to crack. One of the most troubling signs came when Tamara confided in a close friend about a strange phone call she had received from Aubrey. The call itself wasn't unusual. Aubrey often contacted her to discuss their children or their shared business ventures, but there was something unsettling in his tone. According to Tamara, he sounded angry and resentful, as though his patience had run out. The conversation left her feeling on edge, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. By October 2021, the situation had escalated. Aubrey's behavior became more unpredictable, and the control he exerted over Tamara intensified. Tamara's closest friends began to worry about her safety. They noticed that she was becoming more cautious, more anxious, but she remained reluctant to involve the authorities. She feared that confronting Aubrey or making his actions public would only worsen the situation, and she didn't want to bring additional stress into her daughter's lives. Tamara's friends attempted to offer support, but they also felt helpless. Despite the growing concern, it seemed that there were few options for her to escape the grip Aubrey had on her. She had tried to create boundaries, but Aubrey's persistence made it clear that he had no intention of respecting them. This toxic dynamic was slowly suffocating Tamara, and no one could have predicted how far Aubrey would go to maintain control. Little did Tamara know that her final encounter with Aubrey would mark the tragic end of her life. The evening of October 19, 2021, began like any other in Tamara Padi's life, a woman going through the motions of an ordinary day. After a long workday at Greenleaf Health and Social Care, she had returned to her home in the quiet, suburban area of Redbridge. The day was no different in terms of the routine, but the underlying tension that had been building for months between her and her estranged husband, Aubrey, was nearing its breaking point. Aubrey had been persistently trying to re-establish control over her life, and while Tamara had sought solace in her work and her two daughters, the oppressive cloud of his presence never really lifted. For weeks, he had been showing up at her house without notice, demanding to see their children, and making unannounced visits to her workplace. There were even rumors circulating among her colleagues that Aubrey had been coming around, appearing angry and unpredictable. Tamara had planned to spend the evening quietly, possibly catching up on some personal tasks, but by the time the clock struck around 7:30 p.m., a knock on her door would change everything. When she opened it, she was met by the figure of her ex-husband. Aubrey stood there, no sign of hesitation or warmth in his expression. His demeanor was cold, his eyes hard with frustration, and in his voice, there was an unmistakable edge of anger. Tamara, used to his appearances, must have felt a wave of dread sweep over her. But at this point, she had no idea that this evening would mark the tragic end of her life. What followed was the beginning of a violent confrontation that no one saw coming, despite the obvious signs leading up to it. According to the statements from those who later investigated the scene, Aubrey had a clear motive: to force Tamara back into his life, to reassert control, and if necessary, to get rid of the obstacle she had become to him. It was revealed that, in the heat of their argument, Aubrey made a series of threats that he had been making for some time but that Tamara had dismissed as the empty ramblings of a man who couldn't accept their separation. However, on that night, something in Aubrey snapped. Witnesses described hearing the argument escalating into something much darker, although there were no direct witnesses to the violence that followed. Tamara's neighbors would later recall hearing loud, aggressive shouts coming from her home, a sign of the argument turning dangerous. No one immediately intervened, perhaps unaware of the escalating danger, or perhaps too scared to get involved. Inside her house, Tamara was likely overwhelmed with fear as Aubrey pressed her to listen to him one last time, demanding that she reconsider their marriage. But instead of understanding, she was met with force. The fight quickly turned physical. Aubrey, in a fit of rage, assaulted Tamara, striking her violently. Her screams would have echoed through the house, but there was no one around to help. The damage Aubrey caused in those few moments was catastrophic, leaving Tamara with life-threatening injuries. What was meant to be a desperate, final attempt to control his estranged wife escalated into murder. The brutality of the attack was clear. Aubrey's rage blinded him to any consideration for her life, and in a final act of violence, he took it. The moment was shocking not only because of the ferocity of the assault but because it marked the tragic end to a life that had been full of promise and potential. Tamara had been a strong, independent woman with a bright future ahead of her, and her death that night was a devastating blow to all who knew her. Aubrey, realizing what he had done, would later leave the scene. But the tragedy didn't end there. What Aubrey failed to understand in that moment was that he couldn't erase Tamara's existence from his life so easily. Her 2 daughters were about to face the most horrific loss imaginable. Their mother, the woman who had been their protector and guide, was gone forever. The police arrived at the scene shortly after neighbors reported hearing suspicious sounds, including the sounds of a loud altercation. When they arrived at Tamara's house, they found the door ajar, and inside, the gruesome scene of her lifeless body. Investigators quickly pieced together the details, confirming that Aubrey Padi was the primary suspect. His violent history, the strained relationship, and the timing of his presence at her home made him the most likely perpetrator. Aubrey, having fled the scene after the crime, remained on the run for several days, and the police launched a manhunt to capture him. In the hours following the crime, investigators uncovered evidence of Aubrey's obsession with Tamara, his refusal to let go of their marriage, and his pattern of threatening behavior in the months leading up to her death. All of these factors painted a chilling picture of a man who would stop at nothing to maintain control over the woman he believed he owned. The investigation revealed the extent of the manipulation and coercion that Tamara had been subjected to. Despite her best efforts to regain her independence, Aubrey's refusal to let her go had become more dangerous with time, culminating in a fatal attack that was premeditated, driven by years of emotional and psychological abuse. Aubrey's motive was clear. In his mind, if he couldn't have Tamara, no one could. The aftermath of Tamara Padi's brutal death was felt immediately by her family, friends, and colleagues. The shock and disbelief of the event spread through the community, and the reality of her tragic fate began to sink in. For her daughters, the loss was unfathomable. Their mother, a loving and dedicated figure in their lives, had been taken in a moment of sheer violence, leaving them with nothing but the memories of a woman who had once been full of life. The police were swift in their response. The crime scene, located in a quiet suburban neighborhood, was thoroughly investigated. Tamara's body was found in a pool of blood in the living room, and the immediate signs pointed to a violent struggle. The evidence collected during the investigation, though damning, was just the beginning of a complex case that would unfold in the following days. As the detectives started to piece together the details of Tamara's final moments, they quickly zeroed in on Aubrey Padi, her estranged husband. His violent behavior and prior threats were well documented, and he was the first suspect. In the days before the murder, he had been seen repeatedly trying to contact Tamara and had shown up at her house unannounced several times. Investigators were able to gather surveillance footage from nearby homes and local businesses that showed Aubrey in the area around the time of Tamara's death. His presence there was no coincidence. Aubrey had also been involved in a number of troubling incidents leading up to the murder. Neighbors recalled seeing him acting erratically, his temper flaring during interactions with others. Some reported overhearing heated arguments between him and Tamara, where his threats were becoming increasingly menacing. But no one could have predicted that his rage would escalate to murder. After his disappearance, the police launched a manhunt to track down Aubrey. His flight from the scene of the crime made it clear he was attempting to evade capture, but the evidence against him was mounting. Forensic experts confirmed that Tamara's injuries were consistent with a violent attack, and that her death had occurred sometime between 7:30 and 8 p.m., just hours after Aubrey had been seen at her doorstep. As the investigation continued, detectives uncovered more details about the strained relationship between the couple. Tamara had attempted to build a new life for herself and her children, but Aubrey's relentless pursuit of control made it impossible. The couple had separated several months before the murder, and Tamara had begun to distance herself from Aubrey, seeking refuge in her work and her children. Yet, Aubrey's obsession with her never waned, and he continued to harass her, hoping to reclaim the life he once had. The more Tamara resisted, the more violent his actions became. Detectives also learned of the chilling phone conversations Aubrey had had with Tamara in the days leading up to her death. According to phone records, he had left her numerous voicemails, each more threatening than the last. One message, in particular, stood out. In it, Aubrey told Tamara that she would regret leaving him and that she couldn't escape him forever. The message revealed the deep resentment he harbored, along with his determination to regain control of his life, no matter the cost. The investigation team also examined Tamara's personal belongings, including her diary and digital records. In these, they discovered a trail of distress that Tamara had tried to hide from her family. She had documented the increasing harassment from Aubrey and her mounting fear for her safety. In one entry she wrote, "I'm afraid. Every time I think I've gotten away from him, he finds a way to make me feel trapped." This heartbreaking note highlighted the emotional toll the abusive relationship had taken on her. As the search for Aubrey continued, it became clear that he had been planning his escape. Police found that he had drained his bank accounts and sold several of his personal belongings in the days prior to the murder. He had made arrangements to flee the area, but his plans were ultimately thwarted when a tip from a local informant led investigators to his hideout. Aubrey was arrested without incident and brought in for questioning. When questioned by detectives, Aubrey's story was inconsistent and filled with contradictions. He initially claimed he had been at home at the time of the murder, but evidence quickly disproved this claim. His alibi fell apart under scrutiny, and he eventually admitted to being at Tamara's house on the night of the murder. However, he denied any involvement in her death, suggesting that someone else must have been responsible. Despite his attempts to deflect blame, the evidence was overwhelming. The police gathered statements from Aubrey's family and friends, many of whom revealed that he had become increasingly volatile in the months leading up to Tamara's death. His inability to cope with the dissolution of his marriage, coupled with his deep-seated jealousy and control issues, painted a clear picture of a man driven to violence by a need to possess Tamara at any cost. Aubrey's arrest brought some closure to the case, but it was little comfort to those who had lost a beloved mother, daughter, and colleague. The tragic death of Tamara Padi had left an indelible mark on her community, and her family would forever be haunted by the brutal way she was taken from them. The arrest of Aubrey Padi brought a sense of relief to many, but the path to justice for Tamara Padi was just beginning. The investigation had gathered substantial evidence, but it would be the courtroom that would ultimately decide whether Aubrey would be held accountable for his actions. As the legal process unfolded, the emotional weight of the case grew heavier for Tamara's family, who had to relive the trauma of her death each time the case was discussed in court. Aubrey's trial began several months after his arrest. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense as the prosecution presented their case. The key evidence against Aubrey was undeniable. Phone records, forensic evidence, and witness testimonies all painted a clear picture of the events leading up to Tamara's murder. It was revealed that Aubrey's violent obsession with his estranged wife had escalated over time, leading him to take the ultimate, irreversible step. The prosecution called on numerous witnesses, including law enforcement officers, forensic experts, and friends and family members who had witnessed the deterioration of Aubrey and Tamara's relationship. The most compelling testimony came from a friend of Tamara's, who described the emotional and physical toll the abusive relationship had taken on her. The friend recounted how Tamara had sought refuge in her work and children, but no matter how hard she tried, Aubrey's constant harassment and threats kept her in a state of fear. Tamara's daughters also testified, their voices trembling with grief as they spoke about their mother's love and how they had witnessed the slow destruction of their family. Their testimony was heart-wrenching, as they recounted the traumatic moments of their mother's life and the final days leading up to her death. They spoke of the fear that had lingered in their home, a fear that had grown stronger with each phone call, each uninvited visit from their father. It was clear that their mother had been trapped in a cycle of abuse, and they were left powerless to stop it. The defense, however, tried to cast doubt on the evidence. Aubrey's attorneys attempted to suggest that his behavior was the result of a breakdown in his mental health, attempting to shift the blame away from his actions. They argued that Aubrey had been emotionally distressed following the breakdown of his marriage and that he had not intended to kill Tamara, but rather had been overcome by a moment of rage. They suggested that his actions were not premeditated and that he was not fully responsible for what happened. However, the jury was unconvinced by the defense's arguments. The overwhelming evidence against Aubrey, coupled with the testimonies of those who had witnessed his abusive behavior, made it clear that this was not a crime of passion or an accident. It was the tragic culmination of months, if not years, of manipulation, control, and violence. Aubrey's actions were deliberate and calculated, and the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. The conviction of Aubrey Padi brought a sense of justice to Tamara's family, though it could never fully erase the pain of her loss. Her daughters, though devastated, could take comfort in knowing that their mother's killer would be held accountable for his actions. They had fought for her memory, and in the end, they had achieved some measure of justice. During the sentencing phase, the prosecution asked the judge to impose the maximum penalty. Aubrey's behavior, they argued, demonstrated a complete disregard for human life, and his obsessive, violent nature made him a danger to society. The defense attempted to plead for leniency, citing Aubrey's history of mental health struggles, but the judge ultimately sided with the prosecution. Aubrey Padi was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While the conviction brought some closure, the impact of Tamara's death would never truly fade. Her family and friends continued to mourn her loss, and the community remained deeply shaken by the brutality of the crime. The case served as a painful reminder of the dangers of domestic abuse and the devastating consequences it can have on families. In the aftermath of the trial, Tamara's daughters became advocates for domestic violence awareness. They shared their mother's story in an effort to help others understand the signs of abuse and to prevent similar tragedies from occurring. Their bravery in speaking out about their mother's death helped shine a light on the importance of supporting victims of domestic violence and providing resources for those who are trapped in abusive relationships. Tamara's legacy, though forever tainted by the violence that claimed her life, also became a beacon for change. Her daughter's advocacy work inspired many, and they vowed to honor her memory by helping others who found themselves in situations similar to hers. They wanted to ensure that their mother's death would not be in vain, and that others could find the strength to escape before it was too late. Tamara Padi's death is a tragedy that speaks volumes about the hidden dangers of coercive control and domestic violence. Her story, though marked by immense pain, shines a light on the silent struggles many face behind closed doors. Her journey is not just a reminder of the importance of being vigilant in relationships, but also a call for greater societal awareness and support for those experiencing abuse. The importance of legal measures cannot be overstated. Even after their separation, Aubrey's ability to gain access to Tamara's life, and ultimately her home, demonstrates how often the law fails to protect victims from perpetrators who refuse to let go. Domestic violence laws need to be stricter, with a better understanding of coercive control, and the enforcement of restraining orders and other protective measures must be more effective. Tamara's life and death serve as an urgent call to action. We need to do better at recognizing and addressing the signs of abuse early, offering victims the help they need, and ensuring perpetrators are held accountable. Her story is one of immense loss, but it also carries with it the power to inspire change, urging each of us to take domestic violence more seriously, to stand up for those suffering in silence, and to help create a safer environment for everyone. As we reflect on her life and untimely death, we are left with the painful realization that so many victims of domestic violence, like Tamara, go unnoticed and unheard until it's too late. But her story is also one of resilience. Despite the horror she endured, her case has raised awareness, and it continues to serve as a catalyst for change in how society approaches domestic violence. By sharing stories like Tamara's, we not only honor her memory, but we also contribute to a world where domestic violence is no longer hidden in the shadows. It's essential for each of us to recognize the signs of abuse, to be advocates for those who are suffering, and to offer help when it's needed most. Tamara's tragic death serves as a somber reminder that we all have a role to play in ending the cycle of abuse. It is a shared responsibility to create safe spaces for individuals to speak out and to support those who might be too afraid to seek help. The lessons from her story should compel us to continue fighting for stronger legal protections, better mental health support, and more robust intervention strategies that can prevent future tragedies. Tamara's legacy should not be one of loss but of awareness, change, and hope for a future where such abuse is no longer tolerated. Let her story remind us of the urgency of breaking the silence surrounding domestic violence, Because no one should ever have to suffer in silence, and no one should ever have to live in fear. We at Psychocrimes are here to not just tell these stories, but to understand the complexities, motivations, and circumstances that lead to such devastating outcomes. Our goal is to shed light on the darkest corners of the criminal world, providing in-depth analysis, detailed investigations, and gripping storytelling that'll leave you thinking long after the video ends. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon to be notified of our future investigations. Your support means the world to us, and it allows us to continue bringing you these eye-opening stories. Share this video with friends or anyone who may find this case as impactful as you did. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember to always be vigilant, because the truth is often darker than we think.